Hi, this is Manuel from EMS. In this tutorial we'll be looking at adding and removing gauges for the EDL8 Racing Dash. To add a gauge, you select any area on the screen and right click to select the gauge you want to add. Now that the gauge is on the screen, you can move it around and resize it by right clicking on the gauge itself and selecting the Move Resize option. This displays a window around the gauge where you can grab and drag the gauge where you want it to sit, and you can also grab and drag to resize the gauge, the size that you'd like to have it. Once you're happy with the size, you right click again and lock it in place. You'll see that the gauge has a fine border around it. That's not actually shown on the dash itself. It's only there for a guidance. Now that you have a gauge, you can adjust the gauge to make it look and behave the way you want. To do this, what you need to do is right click on the gauge and select the gauge properties. This will display a window that allows you to set all the different colors for all the different sections. It allows you to set all the different text attributes. Any features of the gauge can be turned on and off, and the positions, sizes, and angles of each of the gauge elements can be adjusted in this section of the screen. Okay, you can see here that the needle color is orange, the danger color is red. Now you can change the color by clicking on one of the arrows and selecting a different color, and you can see that it happens instantly on the gauge, so you can visually see what's going on. If you're not happy with any of the default colors, you can select other. This allows you to define your own colors. So to select, you can select other by scrolling down the list right to the bottom and select the word other. And now you can see that there's a swash of colors there that you can select from, or you can define your own colors using the Define Custom Colors option. In this case, we can just simply drag these little pointers on the color chart to adjust the color and its brightness. And when you're happy with it, you can press the OK button, and you can see that it instantly applies it to the gauge. With the text settings, you select the text setting option, and now you can give the gauge a name. We'll call it RPM. You can set its minimum and maximum value, and we'll set it to say 7,000 RPM. We can set the number formatting, so this formatting is telling the system to display leading zeros without decimals. If you want to show decimals, then you just type in the way you want the number displayed, and you can see how the 888 is now changed to display 2 decimal positions. You can set the danger zone, so let's say we'll set the danger zone from 5,500 RPM up to 7,000 RPM. Right, and that's moved the danger zone to those values. You can select the number of labels to better fit your gauge span, and you can see that probably some work better than others. And you can set the number of ticks between each label. So we've set this now, we'll set it to 5. You can set the gauge layer that defines how gauges are layered. Any gauge with a higher number will sit above or on top of a gauge with a lower number. And the divider here is interesting. What you can do with this is, with the RPM gauge, you really don't want to be looking at your labels in thousands. You'd rather be looking at it as single digits. So you use a divider to adjust that. So for this case, we'll divide it by 1000 and you'll see what the result is. Now, to activate different features on the gauge, such as displaying the text value, you can just turn it on and off. You can see that the 888 is turning on and off. Or you can turn off the danger zones, or turn off the gauge title, or any of these other options. This particular gauge has two pointer types. One's a needle pointer and the other one's a slider pointer, or we call them needles. I can show you what the slider looks like later on. You can also now change the different aspects of the gauge via this screen here, where you can change the border width and make the border fatter or thinner. You can change the center border and make that fatter or thinner. You can change the danger width and make it the same as the tick background width, or make it smaller. And similarly with the tick background width, you can also change that as well. You can change the span of the tick background so that it actually is larger than the tick span itself, or smaller than the tick span itself, or leave it the same as a tick span. You can also change the position of the value text. You can see that that's moving up and down, and also the position of the title. You can see that that's moving up and down. You can change the span angle of the gauge span, and you can see the effect that that's having. You can also see that the needle's moving as well, but the way to adjust that out is to adjust the offset. So you can now bring the gauge offset back around to match the needle. You can also adjust the tick width, so you can make the ticks fatter or thinner, and the center radius, you can make that bigger or smaller, and the position of the dial numbers, you can bring them in closer or send them out further. Earlier I said that I will show you what a slider needle is. So first of all, let's make sure that the slider needle is enabled, and you can see that it's ticked, so it is. We've got both the pointer and the slider ticked, so they'll both be shown. Alright, now you can do this by using the test gauge option. This is used to, once you've created a gauge, you can test it and see what it looks like once it comes alive. At the moment, we've only got one gauge on the screen, so that's the only slider that's available here. You can see it's got RPM, and all of the other possible gauges have no gauge found as their label. Right, so all we need to do is drag the slider along, and you can see that the needle is moving along with our mouse movement, and the slider is moving along with it. I'll show you what the effect is without the slider. Alright, so we go gauge properties, and now we'll turn off the slider and you'll see what the difference is. We'll go into test gauges again, and now there's no slider, just the pointer needle moving. Right, you'll also see that the values have changed color and they went to yellow. This is just another helpful indicator to tell you that you're in your danger zone, although yellow is probably not the best color to choose on a yellow background.